You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research.
Hello and welcome to the show with me, Andy Duncan, in London. Today, coming to us from Hartford, Connecticut, my special guest is David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States under both Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. On today's show, we'll be discussing fiscal deficits, government healthcare, and how America can be turned around. Hello, David.
Great to be with you. London's a great town.
It's a fantastic place. Now, in the past, you've compared America to the Roman Empire, and that the fiscal deficits of the ancient empire helped lead to its inevitable collapse. Do you think fiscal deficits are definitely going to bring America down, or can America be made great again?
Well, America can definitely be made great again. It's not too late, but what we need is a wake-up call, a call to action, and a specific course correction to try to be able to make sure that we don't repeat history. You know, we are the longest-standing republic on earth today, but we're not the longest-standing republic that's ever existed. That was the Roman Republic. So we need to learn from history, learn from others, and take steps to make sure that our best days are ahead of us.
And which countries do you think lessons should be learned from?
Well, there are a lot of countries that lessons can be learned from. The fact is that if you look at Australia, for example, Australia is in the best fiscal condition, arguably long term, of any major country. Canada had serious fiscal challenges in the 90s, made a number of tough steps and turned things around. Even your own United Kingdom has made some very difficult choices in recent times to try to help turn things around. And if we look to countries like Germany, who been able to do things with their education system, that I think we can learn from as well, to try to help us deal with some of our challenges there. So the United States is not an island. It's a great nation. It may be the largest economy, maybe the temporary sole superpower, but it's not number one in everything. And it can learn from others and should learn from others.
When President Obama came to the White House, he promised change with a capital C. Do you think financial accountability has changed for the better under Obama, or has it changed for the worse?
Well, unfortunately, President Obama promised that he was going to do something that he never did. He promised that he was going to be a uniter rather than a divider. And unfortunately, he hasn't done that. Our financial condition today is much worse than when President Obama took office. Frankly, from George Washington, who was our first president, to William Jefferson Clinton, who was our 42nd president, we only accumulated $5.5 trillion in debt. And now we're up to $17.5 trillion. So stated differently, we've more than tripled it under two presidents. And yet we still have these huge unfunded obligations associated with our social insurance programs, our social insurance program pension and scheme, which is Social Security, as well as Medicare, and now, ultimately, the Affordable Care Act, which is going to end up costing a lot more money than the Obama administration estimated.
Now, despite many problems with Obamacare and various states putting in roadblocks and organizational chaos, the federal government do seem to be just ramming it through. Do you think that this can be reversed? Do you think Obamacare can be stopped? And if it can't, what are the consequences of Obamacare?
Well, Obamacare, again, is not what people were promised. People were promised that they could keep their insurance and that all this was designed to do is to provide options for people who did not have insurance. But in reality, because it set certain minimum standards, many people that already had insurance, that were very happy with their insurance, their policies were canceled. And now they have policies that in many cases are inferior policies for a lot higher cost. In addition to that, not nearly enough young people are signing up for the plan. We're having a lot of people sign up for our Medicaid program, which is publicly financed, if you will, but not enough signing up for the program that's supposed to be self-sustaining. And what a lot of people don't realize is built into the Affordable Care Act is a bailout provision for insurance companies. So the taxpayers are probably going to be on the hook for some large payments to meet those guarantees. My personal view is the United States should have some level of universal health care. It should be preventative, wellness, and catastrophic protection. The government's going to always do more for the poor, for the disabled, and for the military. But government in the United States promises way too much, and it subsidizes way too many people, and the result of that, it creates a system that is unaffordable and unsustainable.
Now, people such as yourself and Ron Paul have long campaigned for fiscal responsibility. Do you think your campaigns are actually starting to get through to some people now in Congress, or will it take a real financial crisis to bring your message home to them?
Well, for 10 years, both as Comptroller General of the United States as well as head of two not-for-profit entities, I focused on telling the public the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about our financial conditions. I also talked about what are some sensible solutions that ought to be able to gain bipartisan support to deal with our financial challenges. The good news is there's 3 times more awareness and support among the American public to be able to start to defuse this ticking debt bomb than there was 10 years ago. And the good news is that there has been some progress in Washington in recent years. Our deficits are down from over $1 trillion 4 years in a row to last year $670 billion. It will be somewhat less this year. The bad news is that Washington is totally dysfunctional, and they haven't dealt with the 3 things we have to deal with. You have to reform Social Security. You have to rationalize health care promises and do more to control costs. And you have to do comprehensive tax reform that will make the system simpler, fair, more competitive, and generate more revenues. And by the way, there's actually one more thing. We need to move away from across-the-board spending cuts and separate the wheat from the chaff between which government programs are working and which ones aren't. The ones that are working, we should spend more on. The ones that aren't, we should cut or eliminate.
And what do you think of America's overseas military commitments? Is that a crucial thing, or is that something that could be cut back?
Well, clearly, national defense and homeland security are constitutional responsibilities of the federal government. At the same point in time, there's no question that the United States has taken on a disproportionate burden for global security. I think that the nature of the threats that we face today are fundamentally different than they were during the Cold War era. The idea that we're going to get involved in a major force-on-force, war is not very likely. The types of threats that we face today are very different, it's very diffuse. And so I think we do need to reconsider our force structure. We do need to reconsider our deployment of forces. We do need to reconsider our allocation of resources within the defense budget. My view is that defense ought to be able to get a minimum of 3% of GDP each year, given its importance and its constitutional role. But anything more than that has to be based upon credible threats to the national security of the United States and its allies.
Now, if the government doesn't start doing something about all these spending commitments and all this borrowing, there probably will be a financial crisis at some point. How do you think our listeners can best protect themselves from such a financial crisis?
Plan, save, invest, preserve your savings. Don't take on too much debt. Diversify your investments. And in particular, be concerned about the possibility that there could be significant increases in interest rates over time. Also, I think when you look at the currency situation, one has to recognize that I believe the United States will stay a global reserve currency, but if it doesn't end up doing more to not only get its fiscal house in order, which is tax and spending, but also its monetary policy in order, the dollar will end up losing market share on a global basis with regard to reserve currency status.
Okay, one thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to wave the magic Casey research wand, and I'm going to put you in charge of everything. The president's going to listen to you, both houses of Congress are going to listen to you and do exactly what you say for the next 4 or 5 years. What's the first thing you do to bring in fiscal responsibility, and what does your longer-term plan look like?
Well, the first thing that you do is you have to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to the American people. And that is the government has grown too big, it's promised too much, and we need to restructure. You also have to end up laying out a principle and values-based approach that will allow you to address the 3 issues that I mentioned. The need to reform Social Security to make it solvent, sustainable, secure, and more savings-oriented. The need to dramatically reform our health care system, including the Affordable Care Act. to rationalize our promises and better control costs, the need to engage in comprehensive tax reform that will meet the objectives I mentioned, and the need to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff between which government programs are working and which aren't. One thing we could do that's basically Management 101 that we haven't done in the 225 years that we've been a republic, we have no strategic plan, we don't have a realistic budget that allocates resources against that plan, and we don't have outcome-based results, based on what we're trying to accomplish, to say, how are we doing? Are we getting better or worse? And how do we compare to other countries? Those are Management 101 principles in order to maximize effectiveness, mitigate risk, and assure sustainability. So that might not be a bad step one.
Okay. And do you have any plans yourself to get elected to political office to put step one into play?
Well, I'm in Hartford, Connecticut, which is the capital of Connecticut, one of our original 13 states and also the Constitution state. And I'm currently pursuing the office of Lieutenant Governor of Connecticut, which is the second, the number 2 executive in the state of Connecticut, and also the president of the Senate for the state of Connecticut. Unfortunately, Connecticut has gone from a flagship state to a flagging state, and it represents, it ranks number 50 in economic growth, job creation, and financial condition. So it needs a turnaround, and I'm going to try to help give it a turnaround to make sure that its future is better than its past.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck with that. And what's the best thing our listeners could do right now to help you promote fiscal responsibility in the United States?
Well, they can check out a website, which is deficitranger.com. That's my personal website that ends up providing the facts, the truth, the tough choices, and possibly some ways forward to try to be able to address them. They can become more informed, they can become more involved, and then they can try to tap their own personal networks of friends, family, colleagues, etc., to turn the pressure up on elected officials to make the political price of continuing to do nothing, which they've become very adept at, higher than the political price of making tough choices that will create a better future for our country and its citizens.
Well, I wish you the very best of luck at that. It's been great speaking to you today, David.
Take care.
Thank you very much, David. Bye-bye.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
You can subscribe to Sound Money on iTunes or sign up to our subscription service at soundmoneyshow.com, where you can also listen to our growing catalogue of podcasts, which include interviews with some of the most famous speakers on money in the world. These include Jim Rogers, Doug Casey, Rick Rule and Mark Farber. A special thank you today to David Walker for joining us on the show, and thank you too very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.